Good afternoon. I'm Curt Levey, President of the Committee for Justice, and welcome to the latest in our series of weekly panels. This one's titled Trump, Biden, and Judges, Past, Present, and Future. Now that the election campaigns are finally underway in earnest, this is a good time to talk about judicial appointments because they're going to be a key issue in this fall's presidential and Senate elections. So we're going to look at the likely impact of a Trump or Biden victory, as well as control of the Senate, on the composition of the Supreme Court and the lower federal courts. We'll discuss what President Trump's 4-year record on judicial appointments tells us about what he'd do in a second term. And what do Biden and Kamala Harris's records tell us about what kind of judicial nominations we'd see in a Biden administration? Also, you know, how will the judge's issue impact the election? Our panelists are 3 prominent experts on judicial appointments, Michael Thielen, Mike Davis, and Ed Whelan. After they speak, I'll ask them some questions. If time permits, we'll take an audience question or two. There's a Q&A function on Zoom, and also people email me questions. Anyway, let me introduce the speakers in the order they'll speak. Ed Whelan will go first. He's president of the Ethics and Public Policy Center, where he runs its program on the Constitution, the courts, and the culture. He's a frequent contributor to National Review Online's Bench Memos, where he's a leading commentator on judicial nominations and constitutional law. He's co-edited 3 volumes of Justice Scalia's work, most recently just this year, The Essential Scalia on the Constitution, the Courts, and the Rule of Law. Next, Mike Davis will speak. He's founder and president of the Article 3 Project. That's a nonprofit that fights to confirm Trump's judicial nominees and fights back against the growing assault on judicial independence. He served as chief counsel for nominations to Senate Judiciary Chair Chuck Grassley, including during the very contentious Kavanaugh confirmation process. He's worked not just for Supreme Court Justice Neil Gorsuch, but also President George W. Bush and House Speaker Newt Gingrich. He's also served in the U.S. Justice Department, including as a federal prosecutor. And then last but not least, Mike Thielen will talk. He's executive director of the Republican National Lawyers Association. He's held that position now for 20 years and been very actively involved in judicial nominations during that whole time. Before RNLA, he worked for the Republican National Committee and Judicial Watch, and I often see him quoted in a wide range of publications, including the Wall Street Journal and the Washington Times. So let me ask Ed to start it off.
Thanks very much, Curt. Great to be here with you and with the 2 mics. Can you hear me comfortably, Curt?
Yes, I sure can.
Great, great. Well, I'm going to start off by talking about the potential Supreme Court picks of a President Trump or a President Biden. I think we'll see a stark contrast between the 2. Let me start with President Trump. He, of course, already has a track record with 2 outstanding picks in Neil Gorsuch and Brett Kavanaugh, but he also has a list out there, a list that he has drawn from before and that I think he'll commit to draw from again. A list that he's going to expand soon. The last time this list was revised was nearly 3 years ago. There have been a number of outstanding Federal Court of Appeals appointees since then, and I expect that many of those will end up on the revised list. And what that means is that Donald Trump, if he's reelected, will have a great slate of candidates to choose from. Committed originalists and textualists, well-credentialed, likely to draw broad support, and if we have a Republican Senate as well, I think these would be relatively straightforward confirmations. In the case of a President Biden, things are very different. We, in theory, really have no idea whom he might pick. Now, in a way, it doesn't really matter because anyone he picks is going to be an aggressive progressive. And on the left, there is no, there's nothing that deserves the label a theory of constitutional interpretation. What the left aims to do is simply impose its progressive agenda in the name of the Constitution. And we can look to see the policy goals that the left insists on to understand what that would mean. We can also look back to a wonderful candid blog post by Harvard Law professor Mark Tushnet back in 2016, when he was salivating over the prospect that he would soon have a President Hillary Clinton making nominations. This is a blog post titled "Abandoning Defensive Crouch Liberal Constitutionalism." In this post, Professor Tushnet explains that cases, many key cases, were just wrong the day they were decided, are not entitled to any respect as precedent and should simply be overturned. This includes Bakke for being too modest on allowing racial preferences, Buckley v. Vallejo for again being allowing some outlawing some campaign finance restrictions, and Casey is too modest because it allows some abortion regulations. He also makes clear that religious liberty is going to be crunched, and he emphasizes that it's really going to be a time to have a real hard power play. So we can understand what this means in the Second Amendment, First Amendment, hate speech. Right now, the anti-racism agenda posits that any racial disparity is ipso facto proof of racial discrimination. An amazing proposition that many folks on the left seem to take seriously. Now, Joe Biden has promised to nominate a Black woman to the court. I expect that his first nominee, if he were president, would be a Black woman, no matter which vacancy is being filled. And there are some leading candidates there. Kevin Daly of the Free Beacon has written a good article identifying 4 of them. I'll mention them briefly. One is Ketanji Brown Jackson, who is a former clerk to Justice Breyer and has been on the DC District Court since 2013. She's written some very long opinions that have actually been overturned by ideologically diverse DC Circuit panels, that is with liberal judges on the DC Circuit agreeing that she got it all wrong. And I think she may be controversial actually on the left because she was on the board of a Christian school that embraced traditional principles of marriage and sexual morality. Someone else who's talked about a lot is a California Supreme Court justice by the name of Leandra Kruger. As an assistant solicitor general, she drafted the brief and argued the Hosanna Tabor case, where the Obama administration took such an aggressive view against religious liberty that even Elena Kagan said, "You must be kidding." But she also has, the traditional credentials that could make her a candidate. Stacey Abrams, who is being considered as a presidential candidate, is being talked about, and her sister, who's a district judge in Georgia, Leslie Abrams Gardner, is also mentioned. She actually got a mixed qualified, not qualified rating when she was put on that court. Demand Justice has put out a list of its own 2 or 3 dozen favored candidates, and that includes a number of Black women, more in the academic activist arena, but those possibly could be considered as well. I think what you'll see on the left is a fight between the hardcore progressives looking for someone who's out and out a fighter, and those who are more interested in looking for someone who meets the traditional criteria. And exactly how that fight plays out, who knows? We shall see. What's going to matter, no matter whether it's Joe Biden or Donald Trump as president, obviously, is who controls the Senate. It's reasonable to expect that that either will have same party control of the Senate. And with the abolition of the filibuster, that makes it likely that anyone that either president nominates will be confirmed. So happy to go into more detail on any of these later on, but that's my quick overview.
Thank you very much, Ed. Mike Davis, that is. You're up.
Yeah, thank you for having me, Curt, and it's great
Thank you
to
for coming.
join Ed and Michael Thielen to talk about President Trump's transformation of the federal judiciary to date and what we can expect over the next 4 years. President Trump in 2016 campaigned on the promise that he would appoint justices and judges in the mold of the late, great Justice Scalia. And the 203 Article 3 judges who President Trump has appointed so far, President Trump has delivered. That includes 2 Supreme Court justices, Justices Gorsuch and Kavanaugh, a nearly all-time record 53 circuit judges to the critically important federal courts of appeals. These are, as you guys all know, these judges are so important because they set circuit precedent in their regions, and this is where more than 99% of federal appeals end. The Supreme Court largely has discretionary review, and as Ed knows, that these Supreme Court takes less than 100 cases a year for oral arguments. So these courts of appeals are critically important. President Trump has filled more than 25% of the federal judiciary. He's been so successful on the federal courts of appeals that he is the victim of his own success. He has filled every single vacancy on the courts of appeals. And if you look at the nominees who President Trump has put up for these 53 slots, they're very conservative, originalist, textualist, constitutionalist, conservative judges. When I worked for Chairman Chuck Grassley last Congress, we held hearings for 36 of these 53 last Congress. So I saw all 36 of these nominees, and they're rock solid with very, very, very few exceptions. None of them are liberal by any stretch of the imagination. And even early on, when the president had to make some compromises on the circuits before we got rid of the blue slip obstruction by the Democrats, even the ones early on are very solid picks. President Trump is number 2 right now for the overall pace of his appointments to the federal bench. And if you look at the Article 3 Project's website, we have a feature on there called judiciarytracker.com. Again, judiciarytracker.com, that shows you President Trump at 203 Article 3 judges is number 2, and at 53 circuit judges, he's also number 2. The only reason that he's not number 1, President Carter's number 1, the only reason that Trump's not number 1 is because Congress created 152 new judgeships during the Carter presidency. Otherwise, President Trump would be number 1. And let's talk about his President Trump's transformative impact on the federal courts of appeals. Again, we're at 53 in just under 4 years. President Obama appointed 55 in 8 years. So that shows you how well President Trump is doing. And again, he's filled every vacancy. This has not been done in more than 40 years, that a president has filled every pending circuit court vacancy. These judges, like I said, are rock solid conservatives, and the left likes, the Democrats and the left like to say that these are, unqualified idiots who President Trump has appointed to the federal bench. That's just simply not the case by any stretch of the imagination. The American Bar Association, the liberal American Bar Association, which is supposed to be the gold standard for Senate Democrats and the left, has rated many of these as unanimously well qualified or well qualified, which is their gold standard. That's the highest rating you can get from the ABA. Almost all of them have been qualified. The ones who have been not qualified, like Steve Gross on the 8th Circuit, were just simply political drive-by shootings by the pro-abortion forces within the Democrat Party. It was just utter nonsense. But don't take my word for it on the qualifications. Ian Millhiser, left-wing commentator Ian Millhiser, wrote us a gem that we can use to point out how good these nominees are. Here's a quote, and there are several. I've strung these on my Twitter account. His picks include leading academics, Supreme Court litigators, and already prominent judges who now enjoy even more power within the judiciary. That's one quote. Second quote, in other words, based solely on objective legal credentials, the average Trump appointee has a far more impressive resume than any past president's nominees. That's from Ian Millhiser. So He has probably been canceled at this point for writing that piece. But let's dig in a little bit more. The Democrats talk about the lack of diversity on the federal bench, that Trump doesn't appoint enough diversity. Well, as conservatives, we care about their minds, not their pigment of their skin or issues like that. But even setting aside that, and let's look at diversity. Look at the types of judges who President Trump has nominated. We have people like Amy Coney Barrett on the 7th Circuit. We have Britt Grant and Lisa Branch on the 11th Circuit in Georgia. We have people like Allison Ide on the 10th Circuit in Colorado. We have Patrick Bumatet, the first openly, he's a brilliant conservative judge who happens to be Filipino and openly gay. And Democrats vote against these nominees in near lockstep. And we document this on the Article 3 Project's website. We have a feature on there called Women and Minority Judicial Nominees. And if you go back and look at how Democrats vote on these nominees, going back to Clarence Thomas, these are nominees who the ABA says is qualified or well qualified, and look at how these Democrats vote when Republican presidents nominate women or minorities to the federal bench. They vote against them in near lockstep. So it's just nonsense. Let's talk about the critically important federal circuit courts. When President Trump took office, there were 4 circuits where there were more Republican appointees than Democrats. The Republican appointed judges controlled the 5th, 6th, 7th, and 8th circuits. There are 13 circuits, 12 regional circuits, DC, and 1st through the 11th, plus the federal circuit that handles patent cases, court of federal claims, and other discrete matters. So out of the 13 circuits, Republican appointed judges controlled 4 of them when President Trump took office. President Trump has flipped 3 of these circuits, the 2nd, the 3rd, and 11th, to majority Republican appointed. So 7 of the 13. When President Trump wins re-election, he could flip all of based upon the number of senior eligible circuit judges, President Trump could flip every single circuit, all 13 circuits, to majority Republican appointed. So he could flip the DC circuit, federal circuit, 1st circuit, 4th circuit, 10th circuit, and even the 9th circuit, the 29 seat, once out of whack 9th circuit. When President Trump took office, there were 11 more Democrat appointed judges than Republicans on the 9th circuit. That is down to just 3. President Trump can easily flip the 9th circuit in his 2nd term. Now, a Biden presidency would be a whole different animal. Not only has the Democrats, they have vowed to turn DC into a state, and as Senator Paul and his wife and Republican supporters at the White House just learned the hard way, there's a reason we have Federalist number 43. There's a reason that James Madison didn't want DC to be a state. It's because we don't want these states interfering with the federal government's operations, like people coming and going from the White House. But setting that aside, you have DC as a state, maybe Puerto Rico, maybe the Virgin Islands. They're going to nuke the legislative filibuster, as Ed said, meaning they're going to lower the vote threshold in the Senate from 60 to 51 votes, and they will pack the Supreme Court. They call it court structuring. They'll come up with other euphemisms, but they want to add at least 2 justices to the Supreme Court from 9 to 11 or more, something that has not been done. We have not changed the number of justices on the Supreme Court in over 150 years, going back to 1869, right after the Civil War. And the Democrats want to do this. FDR failed to do this. It was too radical even for FDR. Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg, the lioness of the left, came out through cold. She took the unprecedented step, and the correct one, of throwing cold water on this radical idea to pack the Supreme Court. But separate from the Supreme Court, where the Democrats are going to try to pack the Supreme Court, they're also, the next president over the next 4 years is going to have the opportunity to appoint 4 or more justices to the Supreme Court. We have, justices who are getting up there in age. So you could see Justice Ginsburg, Justice Breyer, maybe a couple conservative justices on the right who decide that it's time to hang it up. And so we have 4 or more justices on the Supreme Court in addition to court packing. And that's in addition to the Democrats' plan to pack the lower courts. They want to add a bunch of seats to the lower circuit courts and district courts, and especially on the circuit courts, that would undo a lot of the success that President Trump has had on solidifying a conservative majority on the Supreme Court and the lower courts. Let's look at President what President Biden could do on the lower courts. He could flip the Second, Third, and Seventh Circuits back to Democrat controlled just based upon senior eligible judges. He could tie up the Sixth Circuit, and he could reestablish or establish Democrat dominance on the DC federal First, Fourth, Ninth, and 10th Circuit, and he can significantly reduce Republican dominance on the Fifth and Eighth Circuit. So there is a lot at stake in this next election between a President Trump and a President Biden. And I'll leave it at that and let the others jump in.
Sure. Thank you, Mike. And Michael Thielen, last but not least, and maybe since you're the head of the Republican National Lawyers Association, you can include in your remarks, how you think the judges' issue will impact the election.
Oh, great. Yeah, I'll get to that in a second, Curt, but I want to build on what Mike said. If Trump transformed the process, Biden broke the Senate originally. I spoke to that last time on the CFJ call when I talked about how he ruined the confirmation process when he was chair of the Senate Judiciary Committee. And I'll get to that in a second. But first, I want to talk about the person we haven't talked much about, and that's Harris. As bad as Biden was as a chair, I think Mike would probably agree that Kamala Harris was worse as a member of the Senate Judiciary Committee. If I could pick one moment that summed up her attitude and her mindset for the committee, it was when she implied that Kavanaugh was in cahoots with President Trump during former special counsel's Robert Mueller's investigation because of a meeting that allegedly had taken place between Kavanaugh and Trump's lawyer, Mark Kasowitz. She won the night on MSNBC and CNN. They were praising her. They said all they could talk about is how Kamala nailed Kavanaugh. But this is kind of a theory with her. At the end of the day, there was nothing there. She had no follow-up. There was nothing to it. And unfortunately, though, this is a great example of media bias. They never call her out for that. She became a hero for just making the accusation. And again, Harris has been that way throughout. At the 1-year anniversary of the Blasey Ford testimony, she called for Kavanaugh to be impeached, which everybody knows isn't going to happen. It's a ridiculous idea, but again, gave her the headlines in MSNBC and liberal praise. And Harris has been just terrible to Trump's nominees. She's voted against 81% of them. I mean, Mike pointed out how well qualified they are from the ABA standard. Hasn't mattered to Harris. 81% of the time she's voted against him, which, if you know judicial nominations, some nominees are actually deals between Democrat senators in the White House for district court seats. So really, she voted for basically almost all of Trump's pure nominees she voted against. And also, she's targeted some nominees in terrible ways. I'll take the example of Brian Busher. He was a member of the Knights of Columbus. For those of you who don't know, it's a Catholic service group. But Harris attacked her for being, protect him for being a member of the Knights of Columbus. Implied that he was a bigot, anti-woman, etc. But again, Busher was confirmed. He was qualified, but Harris got what she wanted. MSNBC and the far left loved her. So that sums Harris up in a sense. She's very much about winning the day on MSNBC. She's not about actually governing. I will add, since we came up on court packing, she has talked about court packing in typical Harris fashion. There's no great detail there. She just said, I'm interested in having that conversation. She said, I'm open to the conversation about increasing the number of people on the United States Supreme Court. That brings me to Biden. I do want to say that Biden officially has come out against court packing. He and Bernie Sanders seem to be old school in that regard. Obviously, as Mike and Ed will point out, the pressure from the far left will be intense for them to expand the court. So I don't know if they'll give in. But Biden's actual quote on the 4th of July last year was, no, I'm not prepared to go on and try to pack the court because we'll live to rue that day. Again, I don't know if he'll keep to that, but that's where he was. On other issues, let me just say that Biden's record briefly as the chair of the Senate Judiciary Committee is really shameful. The terrible process we see now and that Mike experienced up close in person was really set up by Biden. It started out when he went after the video rental records of Judge Bork and other personal things outside the legal record. And then, of course, it went extreme with the high-tech lynching of Justice Thomas. He really created the playbook. And if you watched the PBS special on Thomas, you got a deja vu when the Kavanaugh hearings, because they were very similar. I mean, the hearings were ended, the regular part of the hearings were done, and they didn't touch Kavanaugh or Thomas. Yet, after the hearings, a formally discredited accusation by the FBI by a woman was brought forward and used against the nominee, and it became, a circus or worse. And that's Biden who started that. Now, I'll also say that Biden has helped us a little bit indirectly, or not indirectly, unintentionally, I guess is a better way to put it. He created the quote rule, the Biden rule, that allowed Senator McConnell to delay the confirmation of a nominee to replace Justice Scalia in 2016. And after what Biden had done to Bork and Thomas, I don't think you can argue that he wouldn't have simply slowed the Senate down or blocked the Judicial Committee from holding a hearing. I don't think that's credible. He definitely would have done that in 1992 when he made that promise to President George Herbert Walker Bush. So in a real way, as Republicans, we do owe Senator Biden, then Senator Biden, now Vice President Biden, obviously, a partial thank you for Justice Gorsuch instead of Justice Garland. And also, let me turn now to a few quotes. Ed did a really good job setting this up. I'll just give a few specific quotes of Biden because we did some research on him. And what he thinks judges should do and the roles of the court. December 19, he said, quote, "The people that I would appoint to the court are people who have a view of the Constitution as a living document, not as a static document," end quote. He also said, as far as judges, I would look to judges, potential nominees, they would have to acknowledge the fact that there are unenumerated rights that are nothing less constitutional rights. They are not mentioned by name in the Constitution. Ed touched on, ran through some of the possible African-American nominees, but also Biden said that he wanted to see half the court be women. So if Biden had a number of picks, they would all have to be women to make that happen. And I won't touch on he also, well, I'll back up now. Now we get to what's going on at the convention. The two conventions, the RNC convention, judges came up a fair amount. They obviously came up much more in 2016. 2016, Justice Scalia was probably the biggest uniting issue for Republicans. And as Curt remembers from 2004, it was a huge issue for President Bush in his reelection too. It's been a great issue for us. Now, flip that to the DNC. I'm going to do something I would rarely do here. I'm going to quote Brian Fallon, who's a top aide to Hillary Clinton formerly and the leader of the liberal demand justice group. He's angry that it wasn't mentioned at all. I guess Ed will correct me that Senator Schumer mentioned briefly the Supreme Court, but the fact is Biden, Harris, and most of the speakers did not, or all the other speakers did not mention the Supreme Court at all. And you think of the context of Justice Ginsburg, whose health is very frail and definitely an issue. It should, if the roles were reversed, the RNC would be talking about Justice Scalia. We saw that in 16, yet in 20, the Democrats are shying away from that issue. And Curt, you asked me at the top. I personally think that's because the Democrats see this as a losing issue, whether Republicans see it as a winning issue. As Ed pointed out, their nominees are so extreme. If you put forward those nominees, there's going to be problems for them in the polls. So I'll just wrap it up by saying that the Supreme Court was a winning issue for Republicans in 2004. It was a winning issue in 2016. And I think it'll be a winning issue in 2020. I think the Democrats really don't want to talk about this issue. They want to talk about COVID, and that's all they want to talk about. Thanks, Curt.
Mike, let me push back a little bit. We were also talking before we got started about a poll that I think we've all seen that seemed to show that the Democrats, that more Democrats were motivated by the Supreme Court this year than Republicans. And that sort of counter to what you were saying about it being a losing issue for Democrats. Can you reconcile the two, or do you think the poll?
Yeah, I mean, I guarantee you, why do the Democrats not talk about it at the convention? I mean, they were very on message that it was Trump was bad. That was their number one message in COVID. They did not vary from those for other things. And it wasn't just that, Biden or Harris didn't talk about it, except for one brief mention by Schumer, nobody talked about it. And when it's that universal, that it came down that this is not a good issue for us. And two, Trump's list. Trump's list was brilliant. I mean, that reassured conservatives. Those were great people everybody could rally around. Ed went through their list. I mean, he's narrowing the list to African-American women because he said that. I can read the quote here too somewhere. And that's not a list that's going to excite their base necessarily. And there's problems with some of them, or the neutral people aren't going to want you to pick the Supreme Court nominee that's going to be there for 30 years based on the fact that she's one race and one, color and one gender, I'm sorry. They're going to want somebody like Ginsburg on their side, somebody who's a legitimate icon or a legitimate legal force. So I think, that poll may have been accurate in the sense that maybe Republicans weren't as happy at the moment because it was after one of the controversial Supreme Court decisions from our side or something. But I do say that if the Democrats saw it was a winning issue, I guarantee it would have been talked to the DNC.
I get your point. Actions speak louder than polls. So let me ask you another follow-up question. You were talking about Harris's record, and it's kind of scary. Do you think she'll play a big role in helping Biden pick judges?
Yeah, that's a really interesting question. Obviously, Biden has said he's a transitional figure. Biden is not the strongest nominee, to put it nicely. His health is an issue. He's had a number of senior moments in the campaign. Most infamously, he couldn't say mental fitness in 3 tries. So there is going to be more than any other president. He will likely be hands off. That's why I think Ed and Mike's points are valid about the way they made the court packing and other issues like that. Because maybe Biden of 2008 or Biden who's 100% with it would push back and have a bigger role. But there's serious questions about his ability. Now, who fills that void? Is it some chief of staff, or is it top aides, or is it the vice president? And also, because of Biden's age and health, Harris could be president if Biden was elected. So I think Harris is a more consequential, important vice presidential pick, both for her possible role and for the fact that she may be president sooner than, or more likely than most vice presidential nominees.
I suppose, she could even be the Supreme Court pick herself, although then Biden would have to appoint another vice president. But she is a black woman. You referred to the demand justice list. Ed did as well. Let me ask you all: are you surprised that Biden didn't issue a list? I mean, it's almost universally agreed that Trump's list of potential Supreme Court picks worked in his favor 4 years around. Is it surprising that Biden didn't try that same technique this year?
I'll jump on it first and I'll let everybody else talk. June 30th, he actually said, and I quote, "We are putting together a list of a group of African-American women who are qualified and have the experience to be on the court." And that list has never been turned over. So either, he didn't have the list, or he's embarrassed by the list, or it's a political liability of the list. So it's an interesting question. And I'll let Ed talk more.
Ed, any thoughts on why Biden did not issue a list this year?
Yes, I see 2 reasons why he didn't. The first, as Mike suggested, is simply that the list would, be a target. It'd be, shooting fish in a barrel. There'd be a lot that's very embarrassing about that list to the average American, as opposed to the left-wing activists. And he can't really thread the needle. He can't come up with folks who will be satisfy his aggressive left-wing base, and also be appealing to Americans, most Americans, I mean to say. I think the second reason is there's this huge diversity battle on the left, and to come up with a balanced list that has the right number of Hispanics vis-a-vis blacks, vis-a-vis Asian Americans, and that's just one dimension. It'd be a real mess to put out a list. There'd be lots of folks who would inevitably have cause to complain. So I think it was a no-win situation for him.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. And I think Trump made maybe one brief reference to issuing another list, but hasn't. Do you think we'll see another list from Trump? This is for all of you.
Yes.
Yes, I think we definitely will.
Yes,
All right.
I agree too. And I think especially since Biden's not going to release his list, it kind of puts pressure on Biden to respond. And Biden, as Ed points out, has no response.
And the sooner the better. The sooner the better for the list to go out. I mean, look, it's not inconceivable that one way or another a vacancy might arise. We need to be ready, and having a revised list out there would help a lot.
I would just say on the list, I think the Article 3 project is going to help Vice President Biden put out his list. And so look for after Labor Day, we're going to go through that demand justice and all the other wacky list that they have out there, and we're gonna feature these potential Supreme Court and lower court nominees because they are gems. And I would say that, remember, Brian Fallon from Demand Justice is the guy who brought us the hashtag defund the police, and so he is truly the gift who keeps giving. And think about with what Brian, how much of this Trump transformation Brian Fallon has single-handedly helped us accomplish by nuking the filibuster on filibustering Justice Gorsuch so we can nuke the filibuster and get Justice Kavanaugh through, blowing up the filibuster for the DC Circuit back in 2013 so we can stack, so Obama can stack the DC Circuit with liberals, and we've been able to use that to stack the 53 circuit judges on the federal courts of appeals. I think we need to start funding Brian Fallon and Demand Justice and paying for their digital ads. I just don't think it's fair that the Biden-Harris campaign has tried to, put him away for the general election. I just think we need to get him out there. He is a very good spokesperson for the right, and I think we should all stand in solidarity with Brian Fallon.
Go ahead, Ed.
A couple other quick comments, if I may, on the Demand Justice list. Of the 32 candidates on the list, only 8 have judicial experience. And by contrast, the list is full of lawyers from lefty activist groups, as well as, it has half a dozen or so full-time law professors. So it's a very, very strange list that I think reflects how aggressive the left is and how and what a politicized way it views the judiciary.
There are a lot of social workers on there, so it will be good.
Well, it is their dream list, people who are activists and are not constrained by any judicial experience. So I guess we shouldn't be we shouldn't be too shocked. Mike, when you were talking about the possibility of Republicans controlling all the circuits, it occurred to me, one of the most frustrating things about Trump's first 4 years is that every time he takes an executive action, they immediately find a district court judge to enjoin it. Now, I guess there'll still be liberal district court judges, but would it be fair to say that if we control all the circuit, that will be a big check on these, national injunctions that are based on, very little other than just the judge's policy preference?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. These en banc courts, the majority en banc courts, are going to keep these district court judges in check. But you're going to see just less willingness from these liberal judicial activists at the district court level to issue injunctions that they know they're going to get reversed, slapped down immediately. Even on the Ninth Circuit, which the 29-seat Ninth Circuit, they sit in en banc panels because they're so big and out of control. We're even starting to get wins there. So it's, again, we've gone from 11 to plus 11 Democrats to just plus 3 Democrats on the 29-seat Ninth Circuit. We just won a big gun case there where Judge Kenneth Lee, a Trump appointee who happens to be Asian American, so there's some diversity for the Democrats. He struck down California's high capacity gun ban. So, it's good news in California. If you're not a perfect shot, or there are more than 10 people coming at you in a riot, you can protect yourself. So thank you, Judge Kenneth Lee, for that. But yeah, I mean, as we probably all agree, these nationwide injunctions are probably unconstitutional, and hopefully we'll start getting some circuit court judges to rule that way and get it teed up for the Supreme Court at some point.
You mentioned, Mike, that virtually all of Trump's picks have been good, which is, remarkable when you really think about it.
At the circuit court level, he's had to make compromises at the district court level, but they're not bad at the district court level.
That's what I meant to say. We used to say that Reagan had the most amazing record of any GOP president picking judges. Has Trump been as good, or maybe even better?
Far better. President Trump's by far the best president we've had. I mean, again, look at what Ian Millhiser said. This is not hyperbole. Just look at their records. These are state solicitors general. They're top appellate lawyers. They're Supreme Court advocates. They're ABA even when the ABA tries to do their drive-by shootings on these political drive-by shootings on these nominees, I mean, most of them are so good they have nothing to go on. I mean, these are really high quality nominees to the federal bench. And what's great about them, with Democrats nuking the filibuster and my former boss, Chairman Chuck Grassley, returning the blue slip to what it was intended to be, which is about advice and consent and not obstruction, we've been able to appoint. These are not of these 53, almost all of them are rock solid conservatives. These are not compromised picks. And frankly, this is where Kamala Harris really screwed up on these California seats on the Ninth Circuit. Dianne Feinstein would have played ball, and I think they would have gotten, from their perspective, much more palpable judges on the Ninth Circuit in California. But Kamala Harris just comes in wildly swinging and never hits, and she just mindlessly obstructed all of these circuit court slots on the Ninth Circuit in California. And now we have Judge Kenneth Lee striking down California's high capacity gun clip ban. So Kamala Harris is the gift that keeps giving. So she's just so bad at strategy and tactics, and we can thank her more than a lot of people for Trump's transformation of the federal judiciary. And frankly, my former boss did a lot on the lower courts on the blue slips and running over their obstruction. The current chairman Lindsey Graham has done a phenomenal job on the Ninth Circuit, and he really deserves a lot of the credit for that. So I want to make sure he gets credit for what he's done on the Ninth Circuit.
I agree with what Mike says about the unprecedentedly superb quality of the Court of Appeals appointees. And again, credit has to go to the White House for that. There are two other factors worth emphasizing, lest we be thought to be disparaging the great Ronald Reagan in comparison. One factor is the whole rise of the conservative legal movement over the last several decades. A development that has meant that there is this huge cohort of superbly qualified candidates who have been tested, who have thought hard about principles of originalism and textualism, who have grown up in the age of Justice Scalia and Justice Thomas. You simply did not have that back in the 1980s, or even for that matter, 16 years ago with President George W. Bush. The numbers in the right cohort of age and experience were far, far less. And relatedly, as we've discussed, the Senate procedural changes, thank you, Harry Reid, the abolition of the filibuster for lower court nominees that Reid brought about in November 2013, and then the demotion of the blue slip that Senator Grassley affected late in 2017. Those have meant that these highly qualified candidates can know that they can go from candidate to judge in a very, very short time and not face the Miguel Estrada treatment, not face being held up for years and, at the peril of not getting through it all. So that's just made a huge difference.
Well, one of George W. Bush's picks for the Supreme Court, John Roberts, has certainly disappointed a lot of conservatives in recent years, especially this year. And it's led to some prominent conservatives saying that there's something wrong with how Republican presidents vet judges. Gorsuch had the questionable opinion in Bostock, but I think it's mostly based on Roberts. Could you all comment on two things? One, what have we learned about how to pick good Supreme Court judges from Kavanaugh and Gorsuch? And does the vetting process need modification?
Well, I wrote a couple pieces this week on the topic, and I guess I'll invite folks to look for them on Public Discourse, but draw some of the lessons from them here. Look, it's a difficult process. There's a lot of guesswork involved in getting superb Supreme Court justices. And there's something about the process that tends to favor those who are politically slick, which also the same sort of character or personality that might be inclined not to push back, might be inclined to go along and to get along when things get tough. So I think that's a problem. And I think I would welcome conservative senators being more vocal when it counts, which is before a nomination is made. That's when the maximum leverage is to have real impact. But you know, I have you know, I'm alarmed by what happened in the Boston case, and you know, I do think there's cause to for folks to be concerned. I think things are a lot better. I'm look at what Ronald Reagan, you know, did with Sandra Day O'Connor and Anthony Kennedy. I mean, he batted, you know, 1 for 3. Obviously, the Bork nomination failed. So, you know, you might say 2 for 4 if you wish. But we have so many better candidates out there now. But yeah, there's still some guesswork, and there's still the massive influence of the elites in you know, convincing people that when they look in the mirror, they ought to see, you know, New York Times editorials.
The two mics, what are your thoughts on those questions?
And I could jump in very fast. I would say with I wrote a couple FoxNews.com pieces on this very topic, and I just had a C-SPAN interview this week on this. I mean, with the Bostock decision, I would say it was wrongly decided. It was a one-off, and it's not an indication of a change in judicial philosophy. Even homer nods is what I would say. And it's certainly disappointing, but I don't think that we have to worry about a Justice Gorsuch, you know, becoming a left-wing activist or a liberal on the court. I think, you know, on LGBT, I think he made the wrong decision there, even if you agree with the policy result, if you were a state representative. But again, I don't think people have to worry that he's, you know, he's going to become a liberal. And if you look at, even with Justice Roberts, I know it's maddening to watch some of the tactical or political decisions that he makes. You know, he thinks he's protecting the legitimacy of the court when he's making these decisions, the public perception of the court, and it is maddening. And I would say that, you know, you have to look at the overall record of the Supreme Court this term, and not 1 or 2 cases that are very badly decided, whether it's the abortion case in June Medical or the Bostock case, the Title VII case. I think the biggest conservative victory this term was Espinoza, the school choice case, where 5 conservatives, without flinching, held pretty broadly that the liberal elite, the Democrat elite, are not the only people on this planet who should be entitled to have the school choice and educational opportunity for their children, that poor, oftentimes minority families should have that same opportunity. And so that was a big win. As for the overall process, when you're looking at textualism and originalism, it's not a perfect process, but there's no better process. And you're going to make mistakes, but you have to look at President Trump's overall record, and it's pretty darn good. Even with mistakes, you know, Gorsuch is my guy. He was a Trump pick, and I think he screwed up the Bostock decision. Roberts wasn't Trump's pick. That was pre all of this. And you know, like I said, it's not a perfect process, but there's no better process. You know, for example, Senator Hawley, I have the greatest respect for Senator Hawley. I clerked with him on the 10th Circuit back in 2006, 2007. I think he's a smart guy. I think he's the future of the party, but I don't think he's right here that we should just throw out this whole process. I think the process works pretty damn well, even with the mistakes here and there, or even with the disappointments here and there. Again, it's like, you know, people complain about America, but there's no better country on the planet. There's no better process than what we've been doing.
Mike Thielen, how's the process working, at least under Trump?
Well, I'll just say it's getting better. I mean, obviously Justice Roberts, who Mike rightly points out is a Bush, not a Trump pick, is still better than Justice Kennedy. So over time, we're getting better at it. I also like the fact that we're appointing a number of younger people to the circuit court, because I think that's important that and as Ed mentioned, we now have a conservative legal movement. So we have a bench to draw from. I mean, I think Reagan had a very short bench. I mean, Reagan had to gamble almost. Now there's a lot of people to go for. I also say from the confirmation process, The most fascinating one to me, and just putting aside the ridiculous issues and the made-up issues of Kavanaugh and Thomas, is Alito, because Alito had a very long record, and it was a conservative judicial record. He even was on an abortion case, and he was able to be confirmed. So I think we can develop more people like Alito who have strong records as well, and not necessarily have to go to people like Roberts, who are, incredible litigators, but less well known as we go forward.
Thank you. We have about 10 minutes, so let me go to a few audience questions. Somebody in the audience asked about what happens if Trump wins the presidency, but Democrats control the Senate, and I guess I would add vice versa. In the old days, we kind of know how it worked, and certainly it slowed things down. But now we're in a new era, post Kavanaugh. There's not even a pretense of good faith. Would Democrats basically just, virtually refuse to confirm anyone Trump appoints, and vice versa?
Let me address that, if I may. First of all, I think that the two examples are not symmetrical. That is, I think that a Democratic Senate majority is going to be much more obstructionist vis-a-vis President Trump than a Republican Senate majority would be vis-a-vis President Biden. And look, if the Democrats control the Senate and President Trump is reelected, I think there's going to be a lot of emphasis on the part of Democrats on just don't have a hearing, don't do anything, and it's going to be tough to overcome that, given the power that that a Democratic leader and a Democratic Judiciary Committee chairman would have. Now, look, politics ultimately constrains all this, and it may well be that you can get a couple Democrats to insist that there be a hearing. Maybe there's some sort of deal could be struck, though frankly, if the deal involves trading on the quality of the Supreme Court nominee, I don't think it's worth it. I'd rather just go with the 8. And look, if it's a liberal who steps down, if you don't replace the person, you have you still have a good situation for a conservative majority. It goes from 5, if you like, 5-4 to 5-3. Can deal with that. If you have a President Biden, I think there's a lot more room, unfortunately, to strike a deal with Senate Republicans. Obviously, a lot depends on the Senate margin, but I think in both instances we're talking about a very tight margin. I think Biden could probably go with someone, by threatening to go with someone who's really wild, get some Republicans to agree to someone who on the surface at least isn't quite as aggressively crazy.
We'll take Merrick Garland.
Yes.
I'll add, I think, and Mike can correct me if I'm wrong on this, but Senator Collins and Senator Graham have voted for every nominee of Obama and Trump's. So they've been, Graham has been very vocal that, it's not my pick, but they're qualified. You should treat them with respect. And our side generally treats them with more respect.
Yep.
So I agree with everything Ed said. It's not the same on both sides. I will say there's 2 wild cards on the Democrat side. I think they know that there would be a different senator from Indiana right now if it wasn't for Kavanaugh. So if they overplay their hand, that could have an effect. And Senator Sinema of Arizona is just fascinating because she has been more open to Republican nominees on not an importance of the Supreme Court, but she may, if it's a very tight Senate, she would be the only person who might be a Graham Collins or somebody in a tight election. So I think the pace in the Democrat Senate and President Trump would be very slow, but some things would move. And I think President Biden in a narrow GOP Senate, I think things would move because too many of our guys respect the process.
Yeah.
Of course, we can be sure that all of those lefty con law professors who back in 2016 said that there's a constitutional duty on the part of the Senate to hold a hearing and an up or down vote would be making that same argument in this circumstance.
Yeah, it was a former White House counsel who said in one of these kind of meetings years ago, the problems with Republicans is they like to be consistent. Democrats don't care. So Democrats would have no problem throwing that out, Ed, as you point out.
Mike, you mentioned Senator Collins, and she's in some trouble in Maine. If she loses, which will be partly because of her support for Kavanaugh, is that going to send a chill through some moderate Republican senators?
Yeah, I mean, Senator Collins is obviously unique. Maine is very liberal. I don't think there's any other Republican who could win in Maine. So you got to start with that equation to say that, you know, her vote on Kavanaugh, she would have had a tough election if there was no vote on Kavanaugh. Number one. Number two, I guess the part that's scary is all the money that was raised in that, you know, strange deal where they said if Collins, you vote the wrong way, you know, we're going to give this all to your opponent. You know, I think DC will be fascinated by that, but I think Collins isn't winning or losing on her Kavanaugh vote. I think it made a difference fundraising on both sides for her. But people in Maine know her and they're not going to throw her out on one vote, but Maine is not a Republican friendly place. I mean, I'm excited to have Senator Collins from Maine. She's done a good job and it's about the best Republican we can get from Maine.
Well, we've only got a few minutes. Let me get to one more audience question, and they ask about whether a Supreme Court vacancy could be filled before the election. They probably have Ginsburg in mind, although again, she's not the only elderly justice. At this point, if somebody stepped down tomorrow,
Yes.
would the GOP be able to fill that vacancy?
Yes. It depends on the number of votes they have. And if the Republicans can't lose any votes on the Judiciary Committee, it's 12-10. Even if it's 11-11, ties do not get voted out of the Judiciary Committee without a majority vote, referring them to the floor. So you can't lose a vote in the Judiciary Committee. And if there are 50 votes on the floor plus the vice president, you can confirm them. But it really depends on the votes. The Biden rule is the rule where the Senate Judiciary Committee will wait till after the presidential election to hold a hearing. The Biden rule only applies when the opposite party of the president controls the Senate. Republicans control the White House, Republicans control the Senate. There's time to get a Supreme Court nomination done this fall. And it's just really going to depend on if there are 50 plus the vice president votes to confirm a nominee. 12 Republicans on the Judiciary Committee and 50 Republicans in the Senate to confirm the nominee.
I agree with Mike's bottom line, but Mike, I had thought that there is a well-established practice of the committee referring Supreme Court nominees to the floor, even when there is a negative vote. That's how, for example, Judge Bork ended up.
You can do it with them, but you have to. Someone would have to switch their vote, and vote them out with a negative recommendation.
Okay, but yeah, there's time now, and I mean, there's time. If a vacancy were to arise tomorrow, the White House, you know, needs to be ready to make a nomination very soon. 6 to 8 weeks, I think, is a reasonable period of time for getting someone through. But even if it happens later, you can of course, you know, you can have your hearing before the election, get someone confirmed thereafter.
Yeah, probably would be harder to do in the lame duck if Trump wins, but you could still. I'm sorry, if Trump loses, but you could still do it. Sadly,
I think it would depend on if the Democrats also won the Senate. So if Biden wins, the Democrats win the Senate. Yeah, it's hard. But if Biden wins and Republicans keep the Senate, then do it. Anyway,
we're out of time, which is too bad because I think it's been a great panel, and it's been a great panel because we had 3 great panelists. So thank you to you all, and we do these panels almost every week on a variety of subjects. Sometimes has to do with the courts, sometimes tech policy. So tune in again for another interesting panel, and thanks again to all of our guests. Take care now.
Thank you, Curt.